In lesson 2, we're going to be looking at building the user interface with HTML. So we're going to be looking at HTML5 tags to display text content and to display graphics and to play media. Let's have a look at the agenda. So first off, it's an overview of HTML, then basic markup and page structure. Then we look at text elements and then go on to displaying graphics, canvas and SVG, and the use of media and HTML5. Okay, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and HTML is the language that we use in order to provide structure to the web pages. Okay, so most of you are probably aware that we use tags within HTML such as P and H1 to perform this structure function. So browsers read the HTML files and then produce the web pages based on the tags that are used within them. On the left hand side you can see a very basic HTML page. The doc type declaration at the top. This particular declaration is obviously for HTML5, and then you have the HTML tags, and inside that the head, where you have the sort of metadata is included, and also the title of the page. Okay, this title does not actually appear within the actual page, but it would appear on the top of the tab or the window that you're actually looking at. Okay, it's only the tags within the body tags, so the tags nested inside the body tags, which will actually appear on the page itself. What versions of HTML are there? Okay, so throughout the 2000s, HTML 4.01 was the standard for web pages. It was somewhat limited in what it could provide to users and was a little bit clunky. So a more sort of rich sort of web experience was required by users, which would include audio, video, and more of an interactive element. Okay, so this led on to the development of a new HTML standard, which was 5. Okay, so the World Wide Web Consortium, otherwise known as W3C, is the standards organization that's responsible for the development of HTML5. So what does that standard actually encompass? Well, it includes HTML markup tags as well as CSS, cascading style sheets, and JavaScript. Okay. Another thing to mention is that HTML5 is platform independent, obviously meaning that you can use it on any or many sort of operating systems, whether it be Windows, Mac operating systems, Android, Linux, and many browsers, obviously, of course, as well, many different types of devices. HTML5 will work across all of them. So what are some of the new features that came in with HTML5? Okay, so the features we're going to be looking at in more detail over this course are audio and video tags, which allow for video and audio to be embedded directly within the web pages. Canvas, which basically creates a space for JavaScript to draw graphics on the page. Okay, so we create the canvas element, which is basically a window using HTML5 tags, but then the actual graphics inside it are drawn with JavaScript. Also be looking at media queries, which is a feature in CSS3 that detects screen size and adjusts the output to fit. Okay, so obviously when we're using a wide variety of different devices in order to view pages on the internet, it's very useful to have some things which are media queries, which will detect the size and then obviously adjust the output to match the size of the screen, the size and dimensions obviously of the screen. New application programming interfaces, or APIs, so these provide access to many digital resources that can be incorporated into the code of web applications, and geolocation, which uses JavaScript to detect the geographic location of a device. Let's have a look at the basic markup and page structure of HTML. A tag is a keyword surrounded by angled brackets. Okay, so we have opening tags and closing tags. The only difference between them being that the closing tag has a slash before the keyword. Most of them come in pairs. There are a few exceptions, such as break or image, but most of them come in pairs. A tag pair or an empty tag is called an element. Here basically see the same example we saw a couple of slides ago, and you can see a number of elements or tag pairs within this example, such as body, H1 and P. Okay, so we can see there the first example there is the H1 tag with some text between the opening and closing tags, and then we have a single tag which is break. Now that is an exception to that sort of tag pair thing where you have a break, which is essentially a line break, so basically signifying that you want to start a new line in the document. Obviously you can't really have an opening and a closing tag for that, because it's just a one-off thing that happens to break you into a new line. Okay, so those single tags are also known as empty tags. Okay, so what's the difference then between a tag and an element? So the element includes everything from the start tag to the end tag. Okay, so you've got an example there of a paragraph. So everything from the P, from the opening P tag to the closing P tag, including the text in it, is known as the element. A few common HTML tags just to have a quick look at. HTML, which identifies the page as an HTML document. Head, which is used to contain or to sort of nest the metadata. It will contain other tags such as title, link, style and script. Title is the title of the document, which is used inside the head tag. And then body surrounds the content that is visible on the web page, okay, and appears inside the HTML tag and after the head tag. P is for paragraphs, then A is for links or hyperlinks to other parts of the same document or to other pages on the internet, and H1 is for top heading, and IMG is for images. Okay, what about using attributes? Okay, so tags are used in combination with attributes to describe how data should be rendered on a web page. Okay, so in other words, attributes can be used to provide additional information that tags themselves cannot provide alone. Okay, each element has a specific set of attributes that can be used with it. HTML5 includes global attributes which can be used with any element. Okay, so let's have a look at the syntax then. So in this particular example, we're looking at the A or anchor tag, which is used for hyperlinks. Okay, so A is the tag. We've got the opening tag and the closing A tag at the end of the line. And href is the reference to the actual page. Okay, and that is the attribute. And then the value of that particular attribute is, in this case, www.bing.com. So that's the value. And then we have the text between the opening and closing anchor tags. Okay, so if you have a look at this, it's just a little question for you to have a think about. What is the attribute in this example? Okay, so we've got img src for source equals house_pic.jpg. Okay, so have a little think. What is the attribute in that example? Okay, so src is the attribute in that particular example, and what would the value be? The value is obviously house_pic.jpg, and then the tag is img. Let's have a look at nesting elements. When you create web pages, you need to combine elements, their attributes and the engaging content. So when two or more elements apply to the same block of content, then you have to nest tag pairs. So nesting is the process of placing one element inside another. The outside element is called a parent, while the inner element is called a child. And you can see this on the example there. So the parent element is the P element, and then within it you have the child element, which is M for emphasis. And you can see underneath how that comes out when it's actually on the document. Let's have a look at some special characters in HTML, also known as entities. Okay, so special characters such as a % sign or a copyright symbol is known as an entity in HTML. So including entities in a web page requires character encoding, or the special characters will not render. Okay, so the user instead would see garbled text. Okay, each special character can be reproduced using its entity name or a numerical code. Each entity starts with an ampersand symbol and ends with a semicolon. We've got some examples of these entities or special characters in the table at the bottom of the page. So if we look at the first one, which is the copyright symbol, we can either use the entity name, which is ampersand copy followed by a semicolon, or we can use the code, which is ampersand #sign 169 and then the semicolon. Okay, and you can also see the $% and ampersand special characters or entities as well. Okay, it's usually safer to use the code rather than the entity name because that's more widely and more uniformly accepted across more browsers. Okay. Let's have a look at the doc type declaration. Okay, so the doc type declaration is used to help a web browser determine which rules it should use for rendering a web page. In HTML4, doc type declarations require a reference to a document type definition, DTD, and they tend to be quite complex. In HTML5, the doc type declaration is simpler, as shown below. Okay, so HTML5 very straightforward. You just remember that one. And all you need to know really about the other is that it's longer and more complex. Let's have a look at some HTML5 elements in action. Okay, so we've got a meta tag. Okay, so meta tags are always included within the head tag or nested within the head tag. And the metadata is always passed as name value pairs. Okay, so just name is description. So the name in this case would be name, and then the value is obviously description. In the second example, you've got content and free web tutorials. So content is the name, free web tutorials is the value. In the very top example, you've got charset, which is the name, and then the value being UTF-8. Let's also have a look at some text elements. Some HTML text elements include B to define bold text, M to define emphasized text, I for italicized text, small for smaller text, strong to define important text, sub to define subscript text, and superscript text. Also worth mentioning the mark element, which I have seen come up at least in practice questions. So do not forget to buy milk today. If you include the mark element there around milk, that will basically highlight the word milk the same way as if you had highlighted it with a sort of, fluorescent marker pen. Default color is yellow. Okay, you can change the color of it, but that's the mark element. Okay, so again, basically, all there is to this really is just showing that the H1 tags and the P tag, and you can see obviously the sort of how the M and strong tag both work. Okay, so M basically makes the word some appear in italics, and strong makes it appear bold. Okay, just a little bit of explanation of that. Okay, strong and M did not appear within HTML4. Okay, they just appeared from HTML5. The idea is that you're using sort of terminology which makes it clearer both to the end user and to the browsers what the sort of purpose, what the ultimate purpose is really of that text. Okay, and whereas B and I in HTML4 are purely stylistic and don't actually convey anything in terms of meaning. The idea is that in HTML5 the new tags strong and M will sort of label the text as being of strong importance and also make it bold, and M will indicate emphatic stress while also making it appear. A few text elements that are no longer used, i.e. that are deprecated. So a deprecated element are basically removed because they're no longer useful within the standard. Okay, so some of those deprecated elements, then you've got acronym, applet, base font, big, center, dir, font and strike, and you can see the recommendation there on the right hand side. There's either a new element or they're recommending using CSS instead in order to get the effect that you require. Okay, so deprecated elements may still render in older browsers, but best practice suggests that you should not use them if you're developing for newer browsers. Okay, it's one of those things that developers will need to take into account because users will still have older browsers, and so you may need to make sure that content will work correctly in those older browsers. But it's not where under normal circumstances, it's not where you should really be placing the bulk of your energies in terms of development. We're going to look now at displaying graphics in HTML. So, images and graphics in HTML. Okay, images are an incredibly important aspect of creating engaging web pages, and there's two major categories of images that can be used. We've got raster images, which are bitmaps, and we've got vector type images. You can see from the two examples that they're very different types of image. Raster image, typically, photo, that sort of thing. A vector image, typically produced by a designer for illustrations and so on. So the raster image is made up of pixels, whilst vector images are made up of lines and curves. So what's the difference then between raster and vector images? As I said, raster images, photographs, the file formats include JPG, PNG, GIF and BMP. Raster images may pixelate when they're enlarged. Okay, so if they're low resolution and you sort of make them a lot bigger, it will lose quality. Okay, vector images, on the other hand, they are digital illustrations, are typically vector based. They maintain the quality when they're enlarged. Okay, because you're basically talking about sort of mathematical, equations and so on, which won't lead to any loss in quality when they're increased in size. Okay, so vector images are typically made with programs such as Photoshop, CorelDRAW, and then converted into PNG or GIF formats. For example, if you wanted to if you'd created a vector image in CorelDRAW, and then you wanted a version of it for the internet, you could just export it into a PNG or a GIF or something to include on the website. Let's have a look at the IMG element. So you can add images to a web page using the IMG tag. You don't require a closing tag for this, okay? So it's just a single tag. The IMG tag requires the use of src and alt attributes. src stands for source, alt stands for alternative. src defines the pathway for the image file. Okay, so basically tells the browser where to source the image, while the value of the alt attribute makes text accessible to people with disabilities. So, for example, people who are blind, visual disabilities, obviously can't see the image itself, so you can include some text about the image within the alt tag. Okay, so red house, for example, or whatever it is, you can just include some information about it. Let's have a look at the attributes of the image element. Okay, so src, the value of that would be a URL, which would specify the location of the file. Alt, the value of that would be text of some sort and would specify alternative text for the image, which displays when a user hovers their mouse pointer over it. Height would be in pixels, okay, so a number of pixels, which would specify the height of an image, and width similarly also in pixels to specify the width. ISMap specifies an image as a server-side image map. UseMap, the value would be a map name, which would specify an image as a client-side image map. So, I mean, that could literally be a map. For example, if you had a map of a country and you wanted to split it up into different counties or regions, you could then do that with using either ISMap or UseMap. Let's have a look at the figure and fig caption elements. So IMG element can be used in combination with two new elements, figure and fig caption, to organize images and provide captions. So a caption is obviously what would go underneath the figure or the image. So as you would sort of typically find in a textbook, perhaps we'd have images obviously with a little caption underneath, giving a brief description of what the image is about. The figure element specifies the type of figure that's being added and can also be used to group images side by side. The fig caption element can be used to add captions before or after the image. Let's have a look at Canvas and SVG. Within the PDF book for this MTA course, you can find examples of a lot of what we're going through in this course. Another really great place to look is W3 Schools. Canvas, for example, there's lots of information about Canvas, lots of examples that you can actually work through quite quickly to see how the Canvas element and SVG and many other things work and function, as well as obviously HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So W3 Schools, actually really great way to learn interactively. If you haven't used it before, thoroughly recommend spending a few hours at least looking through the content on there that's related to this course. Okay, anyway, the Canvas element. So the Canvas element creates a blank container for graphics. Okay, so it's a new element in HTML5, and you can draw graphics using JavaScript. Okay, so the drawing on the canvas is done by an API for Canvas specifically. Okay, so you actually create the element itself with HTML5, but then the drawing within it, you're using this Canvas API for that. Okay, so Canvas is used by developers to create 2D games or animations. Okay, so let's a quick look at the Canvas element in action. Okay, this specific example is drawn from the book. So you would have a script, so anything within those script tags is JavaScript. Okay, and they have a function here that's been created. Okay, if you If we scroll down to where it says body, so within the actual HTML, we have created a canvas to display on the screen. Okay, and we've given it an ID, which you would need to create in order for the function to be able to identify the particular area on the page in which it's going to draw. Okay, so we've given it the ID small rectangle, and we've specified the height and width of the canvas. Okay, so it's going to be 100 pixels high, 200 pixels wide. Okay, and any drawing, if you like, that takes place is only going to happen within that canvas that's been created on the screen. Okay, so what we're doing here then is just creating a blue rectangle essentially on the screen using context fill style with RGB 00255, so 255 maximum value there for blue, and then context.fill rect to actually fill in a blue rectangle. What happens in those cases where you're using an older browser that won't work with Canvas because it won't recognize it? Okay, so what we do then would basically to add basically a link to an image which can be used instead of the canvas element. Okay, so you'd put that basically that image tag nested inside the canvas tags. Okay, and that would be ignored by browsers that do understand the canvas tag, but it would be implemented, i.e. displayed, by those older browsers that don't understand the canvas tag. Okay, so you're just basically here substituting a JPEG image of a blue rectangle for the canvas alternative. So look at scalable vector graphics, also known as SVG. Okay, so SVG is a language for describing 2D graphics in using XML. So with SVG, you provide drawing instructions within your code versus using the source attribute to point to a file. So unlike other image types, graphics created using the SVG element are scalable. Okay, so the quality of the image will not change if it's shrinked or enlarged. So we've just got an example there of creating a blue rectangle again. Okay, and scalable vector graphics, or SVG, are used for larger graphics, for drawings with a small number of objects. The reason it's used for larger graphics is because you can increase the size of an SVG. You won't actually increase the memory by increasing the size. Okay, so that's why it's an advantage to use SVG for larger graphics. You can also use it for drawings with a small number of objects. It can be used for drawings that require a large number of pixels, and they can be used for highly detailed vector graphics. Let's have a look at media. So multimedia is a key component of a high-quality web browsing experience. Prior to HTML5, browsers depended on plugins and media players to allow users to listen to music and to watch videos. Nowadays, browsers that support HTML5 can provide access to multimedia with the video and audio tags. Okay, so starting off with video tags, so you can embed video into HTML documents using the video element. So use the source attribute to point to the location of the video file, as in the example below. The height and width attributes help determine how the video will appear on a web page. Okay. Some of the control attributes for video. Autoplay. Okay, so autoplay starts playing the video automatically upon page load. Okay, so you can just insert the word there, autoplay. In order to do that, controls as well, just insert the word controls, and that displays controls for controlling the volume, playing, pausing and stopping the video. Loop would play the video on repeat. Some of the video formats that are supported by web browsers include MP4, H.264, OGG and WebM. And when you specify the video type, you should also specify the codec. The codec is a technology used for compressing the data. So it's best practice to use the source tag in combination with its type attribute to point to the file and specify the file type. What about browser compatibility? So not all video formats are compatible with all browsers. The MP4 format is the most commonly used by web browsers and mobile devices. To ensure that a video is compatible with a majority of browsers and devices, you should use the source element to include multiple formats. Okay, so thereby increasing your chances that one of those formats would be accepted by the browser. Audio tags. So the HTML audio element works much like the video element. So include the audio tag and a path that points to the audio file. You can modify the audio element using its control-related attributes, including autoplay, controls, and loop. Again, I would recommend going and looking on W3 Schools about this. It gives you some kind of more interactive examples to play with and will improve your understanding of this topic. Audio formats include OGG, MP3, and WAVE. Okay, and again, not every browser supports every audio type. MP3 is the most commonly supported audio type. Okay, it's a little task here for you to do. We will go over this on the course. Basically, you match the term to the description. So you might want to pause the video here and have a go at this task. Okay, so just to summarize what we did then, so it was we went over HTML, the basics of that, the markup and page structure, text elements, displaying graphics, canvas and SVG, and lastly we looked at media in HTML5.